Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so glad you're joining us today from this session from the Collateral Languages Now webinar series, Maintaining the Target Language in the Classroom. My name's Sabrina, and I'll be your host today. Whether you're teaching in an elementary immersion program, middle school exploratory, or high school language classes, we all share the same question. How can we keep the target language at the heart of our classrooms, especially when students need support, routines, and confidence? So that's exactly what we'll explore together today. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Carmen Reyes. Carmen is a Spanish teacher, presenter, and pedagogical author of the KWL program Alba y Gael Inicial.
I think the
She
volume.
currently teaches at the Langley School in McLean, Virginia, and brings years of classroom experience across K-6 settings. She was nominated for Outstanding K-6 Teacher in 2023 while teaching at Daniels Run Elementary School. She was named WACFL Teacher of the Year 2026, and she holds a master's degree in teaching and learning Spanish language and culture from the Universidad de Granada. Plus, she has presented at major conferences, including ACFL. Carmen, thank you for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. Hello, our language educators. Thank you all for being here. Today, I am very excited to talk to you about this important topic, maintaining the target language in the classroom. I believe this is an important topic that it really it's important to review our strategies, the decisions we are making in the classroom. If we are at the beginning of the school year or at the middle of the school year, there is always room to improve and to learn and to review things that we are doing in the classroom and maybe change some of them that can help you to maintain the target language. So let's start with the agenda. So today, I'm going to start reflecting in the challenge of maintaining the target language. What is really happening in our classroom? The problem is that our students resist the target language, or is the teacher who is using a high level of proficiency that our students are not ready. So that is why they feel this confusion and start using English. So we're going to analyze the problem. Then I'm going to share some strategies aligned with ACFL that will help with comprehension. And I hope that these strategies can inspire you and maybe you can use them in your classrooms. Then I'm going to talk about students' tools for staying in the target language. So when these problems, these confusions, these times of frustrations in our students happen, do you think they can do something to advocate for their needs, to understand what the teacher is saying? So we're going to talk about tools for staying in the target language. And later, we're going to think about situations in our class when breakdown moments happen. So how should we respond to those moments? And we're going to end with final thoughts. So let's start with a question. All right. Think about what is the most common phrase or maybe question that you hear from your students that pushes you to switch to English. I would like you to use the chat to write so we can all share what is that phrase or question from your students that immediately you think, oh, I better start speaking in English. And let me read. ¿Qué significa? What does it mean? I'm so confused. I feel anxious. I don't understand. Exactly. I think we all have experienced these situations that students suddenly tell us, I don't understand. In English, basically because they don't have the language to say it in the target language, right? So let me go back to the presentation. Exactly. So let's think about the challenge of maintaining the target language. So I wanted to start with this image. And in this image, we can see a question. The teacher is asking the student. This is a novice level novice level student. And the question says, how would you characterize today's atmospheric temperature? In Spanish, ¿cómo caracterizas la temperatura atmosférica de hoy? So if our student is a novice learner, do you think the student would be able to understand the question? What do you think? No, right? That level of proficiency is really high. Those words, that kind of question can be reframed and in a level, in a novice level, novice low maybe, for our student to be able to understand. So the face of the girl, she looks confused. She looks like, what? What is she saying? So we see that the problem is not that the student is resisting the target language. The student feels overwhelmed. It's actually resisting cognitive overload and uncertainty because maybe she needs to answer and she doesn't know what to say. She didn't understood the question. So when a student shut down, switch to English, and immediately start feeling all those emotions, unpleasant emotions that make them get disengaged and distracted, interrupt, and maybe disturb the class. So, what they are reacting to is how heavy the task feels in their brain. What is the answer the teacher is expecting me to say? So, all that information, new vocabulary, new grammar, new pronunciations, and new sounds, and then processing and trying to make sense. And maybe the teacher is still waiting for an answer, what to say. So, all this is causing the students to feel frustrated, is overload, it's too much, and the students shut down and start speaking in English. And they will let us know, or maybe it's just that the students is going to be silent all the time. So the students are not rejecting Spanish. They are saying, my brain can hold all of this right now. So immediately answer in Spanish. I don't understand. So as a conclusion, so far we can see that the problem is not that the students are not comfortable listening the teacher in the target language. Is the cognitive overload and uncertainty. So when we use a level of proficiency that is not aligned with the level of proficiency of our students, these situations happen. So now let's talk about the strategies, because you know that these situations happen to all of us in all our classes, no matter how many years we have taught. There are always students that are at different levels in the class, and they suddenly feel like this, like overwhelmed, that is too much for this student to understand. So what are those strategies that I recommend, that I have started using in my classes, and I think they can help us maintaining the target language in the classroom? So I want you to take a moment and really look at this image. We have all been there. The teacher, look, she is using the target language with good intentions. It still is a higher level. The question is the same. The student is trying to decode, to understand what the teacher is saying, but is clearly overwhelmed, right? So the question is not how to keep the target language in the classroom. The question becomes, how do we maintain the target language without overwhelming students? So, maintaining the target language, teachers, do you think it's the job of the teacher to be ready for these situations to happen, to adjust the language, to adjust the questions, to rephrase it? Or is also responsibility of the student, and let's say we can teach our students how to react in these situations, keeping the target language. So, do you think maintaining the target language is a two-part job, or is only the teacher responsibility? What do you think? Write in the chat. Both. Both. Two-part language is two-way. Exactly. Yeah, I agree with all of you. Maintaining the target language is a two-part job, right? The teacher needs to be ready for these situations to happen. We need to be ready. We know the times where students are going to be confused are going to happen. So we need strategies to apply them soon so we don't switch to English. And on the other hand, if the student is also prepared for this situation, students need to know that confusion is part of the learning process. And it's okay to be confused because it means that acquisition is about to happen. Think about a class where a student feels comfortable, the student understands everything the teacher says. It's not challenging. So we need to add a level of difficulty to our class to the point that students are challenged and can acquire language using context, visuals, right? So we're going to talk about that deeper in a few minutes. So in this example, the student was prepared for this moment. And instead of answering in English, says, estoy confundida, or uses the target language to express confusion. Perfect. We continue maintaining the target language. So the teacher reframe the question. Make input comprehensible. Use multimodal support and limit language intentionally. And during this webinar, I'm going to explain each of those strategies little by little. So just for now, the teacher is going to apply different strategies. For example, we notice that the question has changed. How is the weather today? It's the meaning of the question continues the same as the previous question that was very complex. But the meaning of this question is the same. We are asking, how's the weather? ¿Qué tiempo hace hoy? And now the students is possible that is able to interpret the teacher words, the teacher questions, applying interpretive listening or reading skills. So that is a win. We are able to connect the student. The student is interpreting what the teacher is saying and answers in English. It's not using the target language. How would you respond to the student? Could you write in the chat? The student answered in English. What would you say to the student? Sí, hace frío. Sí, agreed. No entiendo. En español, hace frío. Ajá. Gracias. You are correct. We need to value the effort of our student. Is connected to us, is following our prompt, and is answering, is participating. So we should say, correct. You are right, of course, in the target language. If it's Spanish, correcto, sí. En español, por favor, en español, could you say it in Spanish and the student would say it if the student knows. But if the student doesn't know, we have to model for them. Hace frío if we are teaching Spanish, or you use a target language. And the student, if the student knows the answer, we switch in the target language, in this case, hace frío. But it's important to recognize the effort, the participation, and value that so students feel confident. And they realize they are growing in the language. So now let's move to, before I move to the next one. If we want students to stay in the target language, we want to teach them how to advocate when they don't understand. So, as I mentioned before, it's important that the students understand that confusion is part of the learning process. Now, there are students that maybe, especially if they are new with the language, they are not gonna feel comfortable saying in the target language that they are confused. In Spanish, estoy confundido, no entiendo, right? But they want to say it, but they feel shy. It depends on the personality. And we need to be empathetic with our students. Social emotional learning is very important to help our students to grow in the language. So, in that case, we can teach our students to signal confusion. For example, during the first classes, you mentioned that if you feel confused, you can touch your head. It's a way to let the teacher know how is the student feeling, or raising raising a hand and say in the target language, I'm confused, I have a problem, I need help. So it depends how comfortable they feel. So this process doesn't happen in automatically, right? It requires practice, redirecting students to use the language, to remind it in Spanish, in French, and redirecting them until they are going to use them without any reminders or support. So now, thinking about the basic thing we need to bring to our classes to maintain the target language is have an environment where students can understand what we say, but as I mentioned before, with a slight level of difficulty. So students in a classroom that they understand everything, they are not being challenged. So Dr. Krashen says it's important to have a level of difficulty that is slightly beyond the student's level. And he says I plus one. And the language that they don't understand, they can infer its meaning using context, using visuals, using maybe a repetition. And when I say repetition, I don't mean, okay, repeat after me. No, you know that it doesn't work that way. For acquisition to happen, we need to expose the students to words several times in different sentences, in different contexts, so students are little by little understanding, figuring out the meaning of the words, right? But it's important to bring to the class new words and let them um, infer its meaning. On the other hand, prioritizing meaning before form, says Bill Van Patten, and that is what we have seen with the previous example. Remember that big question about the atmospheric temperature, and then it was simplified for the question, how is the weather today? So we prioritize meaning. The meaning is still the same, but the form has changed. And that is exactly what we need to do. And last, effective CI depends of teacher language adjustment. We slower speech, rephrase, repetition, etc., according to the actual core practices, right? All right. So now let's move to this chart. I was analyzing my instruction a few years ago and thinking I need to improve in maintaining the target language in my classroom. So, what should I do? And I realized that the students are exposed to the input that comes from the teacher as the main source, and also in my case that I teach lower school, middle school, using a lot of posters, labels in my class. My class is like a canvas for me. I used to say it's like a stethoscope for a doctor is that's the importance of my classroom, to be able to scaffold knowledge. So this is the process that I follow to bring input to help my students to acquire new language, to model sentence structure. So we're going to start with environmental support, and then we're going to move to structural instruction. Okay. So progressive contextual labeling in the classroom. So I recommend having posters and labels in our classroom that are gonna be like rotating according to the content that we offer in our lessons. Not all the time, not during the whole school years, we're going to talk about farm animals, for example. So when we bring that topic to the class, we can present the poster for the first time to our students and ask them to what do you think is the topic of the unit that we are going to start working this marking period. And you reveal the poster and they are going to guess. They are active participants and they can identify the animals from the poster that they are seeing for the first time. So that poster becomes meaningful, relevant, and then you hang it up. If you don't have a poster, ask your students to create drawings, labelings, and then you can hang them on your walls if you have a space to do that, or you can rotate some and bring others in their place. So when the students are active participants, interactive with these posters, with these labels, it becomes more meaningful and the learning is more lasting than just looking at poster during the whole school year. And today we're going to talk about farm animals. The poster is over there, right? So it's not as effective as presenting when you start the unit. So we need to move from decoration to language scaffolding. So it's about transforming the class into a linguistic support system. There are some signs that are important to have them during the whole school year. For example, the ones that students use when they have a need. Puedo ir al baño. Can I use the restroom? Puedo tomar agua. Can I have water? And other signs that when students have a need, you should redirect them to the poster, to the label, and ask them to say it in the target language. So that is why it's important to use them. It's not just to hang them there and to have them visible, but to continuously using them when you notice that they forgot the word. I need a pencil. ¿Qué dices? Repite por favor en español. Oh, I need a pencil. Yo necesito un, and they don't remember how to say pencil in the target language. You point to the label. Oh, lápiz if it's Spanish. So that way students are bringing that a word that it's easily to forget, especially on novice levels. They don't remember all the vocabulary from previous year. They need to review and more exposure. So the signs is important to use them. And consistency is it's a key. When students ask for something, if they don't do it in the target language, take the time to redirect them and say in Spanish, in French, in German, and they try, let them do their best, and then you can model for them. But it needs to be consistent to be effective, to get to the point that they can do it independently when they feel that they are confident enough and they have the language. So when labels are used intentionally, they become interaction tools. And we point and to them and we rotate and everything that I just explained. But I want to share with you my experience when I decided that I needed to start working on maintaining the target language in the classroom. I noticed that there, no matter the content, there were many phrases that I repeated during the day in every class that I used them in English because I saw that that was the only way students were going to listen and follow the instruction. So I decided to write down all the sentences that I said in English. So I said, is these are the most frequent input students listen from me, then if I would say them in the target language, wow, that would be amazing because I repeat them all the time. So I made a list, and these are the sentences that I wrote that I repeat mostly. Sit down on your chair, close the door, close the computer. You can go to the restroom, open your computer, complete the activity, read please, write the answer. Where is your pencil? Close your backpack. Calm hands, manos calmadas. Feet calm, pies calmados. Eyes on the board, etc., etc., etc. So I said, wow, I say these sentences, these phrases so much that if I would be able to say them in the target language, wow, that would be amazing for them because I can use all this vocabulary with content. So I noticed that these sentences have something in common. Most of them are about classroom supplies, silla, puerta, computadora, etc., etc. And also about body parts, ojos, manos, pies. I realized that this vocabulary that maybe my sixth graders they learned when they were in fourth grade, third grade, and I need them to know and understand, so I don't have to say them in English. And also action verbs like sit down, close, open, read, write, some of those words that we repeat and say all the time in every class. So this list was very helpful to analyze what is the vocabulary that I need to focus in order for me to change as a teacher and start using more the target language. So I started focus in classroom supplies and body parts we review, and also the action verbs like sit down, close, open. I made some posters that I printed. I found images in the internet and I labeled them. So I said them in Spanish, but I point to them. Of course, at the beginning it was new. And I introduced them little by little. So students are going to be surprised at the beginning to hear you saying all those things in the target language if they are not used to. And but little by little, by your actions, gestures, TPR, pointing to the signs, they will understand. And the most important, consistency. Use the pointer. If the poster is far away from you, use the pointer to signal what is the word that you expect from them, or what is exactly what you are saying that is representing in a visual. So that is something that I recommend. Now, in the book Alba y Gael Inicial, as you can see, there are activities that help students with listening, understanding, because they have vocabulary about supplies, school supplies, that they have to point to them. But then, while they hear the uh, the sound, the word in the target language, in this case in Spanish, they have to use those stickers and stick them in the right place. So it helps them to recognize vocabulary about school supplies. And well, here I created some other recommendations that you can review them later once you receive the presentation. But I wanted to move to daily routines. Daily routines are basic to be able to teach to our students new vocabulary in context, right? So when our students have predictable routines, they know what is happening at the beginning of the class. We start always with, for example, with a welcome song, los saludos, emotions check-in, the expectations. So they know what is happening next. That predictability makes them feel safe, but we can take advantage of the names of the parts of our class for the students to understand them. For example, if you show a sign, a Google slide with the word greetings in español, los saludos, there's going to be a class that they know that that means they're going to start greeting each other. So that interpretive skills are applied because of context. They know that by practice, every time we see this, we continue with saying hello or las emociones, emotion. Oh, and they know what is coming next. So always show and talk about the parts of the class that you are gonna present that will help your students with these words and understand them. I like if you have roles in your class, for example, el asistente, el líder del clima. So even though you don't teach specifically each word, they will figure out its meaning because they know, and also because they are cognates, right? Asistente, líder, etc. Inspector de las mesas. So when you talk about los roles de la clase, vamos a ver los roles. Oh, they know that you're going to assign roles to students. And the same with the other parts of a class. And something that we always bring up to our class is the expectations, right? And to be able to set expectations, to review expectations, especially when there are incidents. I know we always have. Today I had an incident and I needed to review the expectations. To be able to do it in the target language, you need to scaffold. You need to give that input, that knowledge to your students. So expectation needs to be simple and represented by signs or movement. For example, respeta, if you can use cognate, respect. It's a hard because when you respect, you care for the other, you care for your teacher, you care for your school, for your classmate. So I represent respect with a heart. And sometimes I need to be very strict and stand in front of the class and I say, yo no veo respeto. Yo quiero ver respeto en la clase, and I show a heart and they immediately understand what I'm saying. I don't have to say it in English. In the class, we look, mira, we listen, escucha, and we speak in Spanish. And you can extend them, but the less, the better when you talk about expectations. I created these signs and those images are from Google. The only thing I did was label them with vocabulary that I know my students can understand, body parts, right, and actions. So when students are not following directions or I want them to regroup and I want them to sit quietly, I print them and laminate them. So I point with my pointer to these images and I ask them to look like that. Copia la imagen. Copy the image. Copia el niño. So they have to copy that posture with their body. Oídos escuchan. Ojos mira. So you can use these kind of images and label them with the target language your students feel comfortable using, and have them in a visible play and ask them to copy the postures. And of course, if they already can decode the words in those images, it's much better, right? Because you are not only helping them copying, but they are interpreting reading the words by reading the words. Another recommendation So you keep and maintain the target language in the classroom, especially when there are situations like disruptions. You ask them, high five, dame cinco, and you show your hand. But of course, you need to prepare the students to understand what is dame cinco, what is give me five. It means oídos escuchan, ojos miran, congelado, you freeze, mano arriba, and boca en silencio. So you can label each finger as you want them to behave, demonstrate every time you say high five, dame cinco. So this is a strategy that can help you maintain the target language in the classroom when there are difficult situations, behavior situations. And last is this one that I really enjoy using with my sixth graders. That what the only thing I did was changing the meaning of each number. So I of course we practice, especially during the first weeks of a school or after winter break or spring break. We review the levels of our voice. Level 0, silencio, silence. Uno, secreto, and we practice. Clase, nivel 1. Hola, ¿cómo estás? And we all practice. Level 2, una voz natural para hablar. You can talk in your regular voice, as a speaking voice. Level 3, the level of voice like when you are singing. And level 4, like when you say goal. And we talk about when it's appropriate to use these levels in the classroom. Which levels would you use? So when situations happen, you immediately show and you say level 2, or in the target language, in Spanish, for example, nivel 2, clase nivel 2 or nivel 0, and they understand. So you don't have to change to immediately to English. Of course, asking students to express their emotions, if they know how to express emotions in the target language, when they feel that somebody was mean to him, or maybe this student is coming from another class and there was a, a problem. For example, a couple of days ago, a girl was arrived crying because she failed a math test, and she was so sad. And I spoke in Spanish because I try as much as possible to speak in Spanish. And I say, what happened? And she looked at me crying and she said, "Ah, estoy triste." And then she changed to English to explain everything. But the fact that she tried, that is important. It was not during class, it was just arriving to class. But it's important to give students these tools for them to be able to use them in the target language. Okay, so we have talked about this. I want you to share in the chat if you use any of these strategies, any of these different ways to keep the class, um, maintaining the class in the target language, especially during situations that require classroom management. I want to read in the chat. Do you use these signs? What do you use when students disrupt the class? Let me see. I haven't. The problem is that I don't have a classroom. I used to be a teacher who works to different classrooms for several years, and I needed to show slides with these images. And every time the problems happen, I show it in a slide. Mm-hmm. Clapping. Uh-huh. Yes. I use posters. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. As I mentioned before, the most important is whatever you decide to use is be consistent. And for teachers that don't have a classroom, I've been there for several years, and you can create slides. I used to have a set of slides only with with classroom management games or activities or slides like I just showed before. So when something happened, I projected immediately and I stopped the class and I didn't continue until everyone is doing the right thing. And it's about practicing, preparing our students to be redirected and to understand this kind of images. What is the meaning of each word? So you don't have to speak in English. All right. So before I move to the next point, when we talk about routine, if you use a textbook, for example, Alba Gael has the same structure during in the book in every unit. Every unit have the same sections. They all are divided and labeled the same way. So that predictability help a student understand what is coming next. For example, class said today we're gonna go to community and citizenships, comunidad y civismo, and they know already what is this about. Oh, they always have a conversation, they always have a story, or maybe today we have hands-on activity, actividad manual, and they know that they are going to work with their hands. So that helps the students to automatically connect an emotion with the words that they are listening or seeing. Okay, so another way to bring input, comprehensible input, is through a story. You can create your own stories. You can bring stories that you get in some resources that you already have, or you can use stories that if you have a textbook from a textbook, right? That may be comics, especially designed for the student level. But the purpose of using stories is to model the correct use of the language, especially with high frequency language and recycling. I want students to be able to describe themselves. And we start with my name is, I live in, I like this, etc. An age, I am my, and then the age, etc. I think those are the basics, right? So we want a story that can connect the students with a context, and in the context, this character be able to express and use all this high frequency language to model the correct use. So, for example, here in this is a comic from Albegael Inicial, and we see a dialogue very simple. Hola, hola. We see repetition, llamas, llamo, tengo, tengo, and they model the use of these high frequency verbs. But after reading, or maybe you can create your comprehensible story so simple, then we ask the students to represent them in different scenarios. For example, let's say you group students in groups of two and you say, what's your favorite place? Oh, soccer, a soccer field. Okay, you are going to meet your partner in a soccer game. And then you're going to meet and you're going to have this conversation. So they have to act, role play like they're playing soccer. And then one says to the other, hola, and the other answer, hola. ¿Cómo te llamas? So the fact that you are bringing the interest to this story, the student's interest to use this vocabulary, make it meaningful to your students. So connect language, use of verbs with your students' interests. And that way students are going to acquire language input easily. And little by little, they will be able to produce it independently, of course, with practice and time. Now, in books like Alba Uno, Dos, y Tres, we see characters that repeat during all the books, and we start with the first one when Alba and Igael introduce themselves, and then in Alba Igael Dos, they talk about Mexico, a trip to Mexico, and in Alvega 3, they share as different situations. For example, here one is not feeling well, and the other talk what happened, because they are practicing the vocabulary of body parts with not feeling well and medicines. What do you need for a stomach ache? What do you need for a headache? Pastillas or un té caliente, etc. So when you use stories and you have the characters like a sequence, like a series, it makes it more, the students connect with them and they are interested in learning what's happening next, what is happening in the next book. Okay, so now I have a question for all of you. What modes supported comprehension most for you? And I want you to rate them from 1 to 4. So from the most from the one that you feel like is most helpful for you for comprehension to the least. Okay? So in the chat, number them. So maybe for you, the most helpful is movement. So you will write 3 first. And then you will end with the least helpful. Maybe it's repetition. That will be the last one in your sequence. Let's see. Let me read your answers. Oh, okay. 4, 1. Ajá. Gesture. Ajá. 1, 2, 4, 3. Ajá. Yeah, in general, all of those different modes of support are important. They are all um, helpful to help our students with language acquisition. We all need to point to the signs, especially if we have them or labels, or point to objects in the classroom to help students to understand and give meaning to our words. Gestures, acting out, draw a quick sketch. I know we all do this, and those are different modes that support and can help us. Before using English, remember, you have all these tools. You can point, you can gesture, you can act it out, you can draw. And if all those things are not enough, then we can think about using English. This is a clear example. If we are talking about an animal, a sea animal, for example, a crab, un cangrejo. Okay, you are talking about a cangrejo, but how do you know the student understand cangrejo? So you can point to the image, you can do your hands like that, and then students, when they talk about sea animals, if you are developing the unit of sea animals, and the student says a word that maybe says the word that you don't understand, but it starts doing this, cangrejo, crab. So you can understand what the student is trying to say by its gestures. So something that I forgot to say is that when we use these different models, we are being a model for our students to communicate as well. So the same way as we use them to transmit meaning, when students want to tell us something in the target language and they don't have the word, they will point, they will gesture, they will act it out, or they will draw. We have to give them those opportunities. Say, okay, before English, you can point, you can gesture, you can act out, you can draw. So you don't have to use English. Mhm. All right. And then now let's move to limiting language intentionally. Remember the question at the beginning of this webinar? It was a big, complex question. It was not a novice level question about atmospheric temperature. And then we switch it, we transform it to a shorter question, but the meaning was the same. So when the students don't understand, what's your instinct? So what would you do when students don't understand? Let me see. What is the first thing you do? Simplify, yeah, rephrase, you repeat it. Rephrasing, repetir. You repeat it slowly. Rephrase. Exactly. You simplify. Thank you. Charades. Yes, you use gestures, movement. Act. Yes, I love acting as well. Yeah. So replace, I will explain it better in English with, okay, fewer structure, high frequency words, purposely recycling, and I can move, I can point, I can draw before I turn to English. Now, let's think of one structure you recycle intentionally across lessons, okay? And we're gonna have a practice. I'm gonna show you 3 sentences, one at a time. And these sentences are very complex. And you have to write in the chat how would you say them in a novice level of proficiency. Okay, so you have to change, rephrase it for a novice learner class, novice level of proficiency. So the sentence is this one. Before we begin, I would like you to reflect on the similarities and differences between the two characters and explain your reasoning. So how would you write it for novice learners? I'm going to give you some time. Ajá. Yeah. Las personas son similares o diferentes. Yeah. Excelente, Mariel. Muy bien. Daniel, gracias. Ajá. Gracias, Gabriela. Perfecto. So we can say for a novice level, okay, look at the characters, mira los personajes. Are they the same or different? That's it. So we have simplified our question to make it more comprehensible for novice learners. How about this one? How do you feel about the main character and why do you think he acted that way in the story? How would you rephrase it? Ok, son diferentes o iguales. ¿Te gusta? Muy bien, Jacob. Yeah. Uh-huh. Do you like? Perfect. So you can write, or I'm sorry, you can say, do you like the character? Yes, no? Why? And that's it. ¿Te gusta el personaje? Sí, no, ¿por qué? And then a student is going to be able to understand you and an answer is more comprehensible. I'm sorry. Okay, now let's move to the last one. Now, take a moment to analyze the image and describe what is happening using complete sentences. Ajá. Describe la foto, describe the picture. Ajá, muy bien, yeah. Perfect. So what I wrote was, look at the image. ¿Qué ves? What do you see? ¿Ves una persona? ¿Dos personas? Do you see a person? Two? Describe what you see. So it's more comprehensible and students will be able to understand and avoid frustrations. And if there is something that they don't understand, they can infer its meaning, right? Okay. So now let's move to student tools for staying in the target language. We have reviewed all the things teachers can do to bring comprehensible input to our classes so we maintain the target language. But how about our students? We talk about preparing them for these moments to happen, right? So, for example, a student, in this case, the student is answering, it's sunny, está soleado. But what happened if the student, even though the question is short and simple, still doesn't understand? And answer in English, what does it mean? I don't understand. So we need to tell our students that there are going to be moments that they are not going to understand everything they read or they hear. And it's normal not to understand every word. They need to be conscious that at that moment is because we are challenging them and they need to use context to infer meaning or try to figure it out because we read before something and maybe what comes the sentence after is telling us something else. So that word or that phrase, you can infer its meaning by context or maybe the image that is in if there is an image joining the text. So, for example, mañana vamos a celebrar una fiesta en la clase. Tomorrow we're going to celebrate a party in class. Let's say the students don't understand what is vamos a celebrar. What is that? Vamos a celebrar. They understand tomorrow and they understand party in class, but they don't know what is vamos a celebrar. We're going to celebrate. Celebrate, celebrar. It's a cognate. But vamos. They may not understand everything, but we have to tell the students it's okay not understand all words, but we can infer its meaning using context, right? So another thing is we need to tell our students that when these confusion moments happen, they can signal confusion, touching their head, for example, or using the signs we have in class and saying, yo tengo una pregunta, I have a question, I'm confused, estoy confundido, estoy confundida. Or if they don't know how to answer, but they can point, right? Point to the sign, point to the object, or maybe do a movement that represent how they are feeling. Um, if you ask, for example, in Spanish, ¿Cómo estás? How are you? And they don't know how to say hungry, but they rub their tummy. Oh, estás hambriento. Estoy hambriento. Sí, estoy hambriento. Perfecto. So those are tools that we need to teach our students to help us maintain the target language in the classroom. And now, what happened when breakdown moments are present already? How do we respond? Students are speaking in English. What can we do? Students, I don't understand. What is the teacher saying? You should say that in English. Okay. We need to understand that breakdown moments are normal and they are going to happen. And they're going to continue happening to all of us because that is the edge of acquisition, right? The students feel challenged, and some students they don't feel well when they don't know what to say, how to respond, how to answer. But we need to know that those are opportunities. They are not interrupting. That's an opportunity for us to decide, okay, they are starting to feel overwhelmed. I better rephrase it. I use body language, TPR, pointing, etc. I will explain it better in English. Wait, no. We have some tools, right? We have, Profe Carmen Reyes, I'm confused. And the student is saying it in English. So immediately I point with my light pointer to the sign. ¿Qué dices en español, por favor? Yo te voy a ayudar. Ayuda, espera. En español. No entiendo. Oh, no entiendes. Okay. And then I rephrase it. Fewer structure, higher frequency words, cognates, verbs, acting, role playing. So when comprehension breaks down, rephrase with less language. remind your students that they also have responsibility in this learning process. It's not all in the teacher's hands, right? They have to do their part. And the most we speak the language, if they are immersed in an environment where we are speaking most of the time in the target language, that is the better place for learning a language. So they need to be conscious of that. Sometimes I say my students, if you hear me speaking in English, I'm not helping you. That is not the best way to learn a language. So when you hear me speaking in Spanish, that is when I am modeling and help you to grow in the language. So they look at me and say, "Oh, okay." So I want to end with a final reflection. So I would like you to please complete the sentence in the chat. One comprehension strategy I will model more intentionally is, and I will read your answers. Uh-huh. I want to model with gestures more. Thank you, Marielle. Lisa, repetition. Modeling, Kimberly, gracias, Alma. Uh, Lindsay, using, it's going too fast. Gloria, modeling. Gracias. Lalis, visuals, modeling. Mariam, usar estímulos visuales. Repetición, repeticiones, clarification with gestures and acting out, modeling, perfect. Yes, thank you, perfect. Okay, so I wanted to end with these ideas. Comprehension is the foundation of target language use, right? So let's bring comprehensible input to our students. I really feel like creating this list with the phrases, with the questions that I use the most in my classes, that I repeated several times, help me to improve, because now I feel I can say them in Spanish. And that means that students are understanding more. And if they don't, I point to my signs. My signs are, I use them all the time because they have a purpose. They help me scaffold. Another conclusion is that breakdown moments are going to happen, but they are learning moments, and we need to remember what to do and remind our students how to be proactive. How can they help the class to keep the target language? They need to be conscious about that. And students stay in the target language when we give them tools. So if they know how to ask for support, how to let us know in the target language how they are feeling, then we can keep the target language for more time. So thank you so much for being here in this webinar. It's been a pleasure.